Hi, and welcome to A Sliver of Shadow. In a world that rushes to judge by appearances, this story invites us to look deeper into the quiet bravery of a boy whose body may be fragile, but whose spirit refuses to be broken. This isn't a tale of miracles falling from the sky. It's about small strength, slowly rising through pain, through silence, and through hope that refuses to fade. But who would have guessed? A quiet boy from a forgotten village, born with a fragile body, was quietly carrying something even he didn't know he had, a small spark of strength that would change everything. This is Arka's story. His name was Arka, born in a small village tucked away in the mountains, in a home with bamboo walls and a rusted tin roof. But what set Arka apart wasn't poverty. It was how fragile his body was. Arka was born with a rare bone condition that made his body weak and prone to pain when moving for too long. He could stand and even walk for a short while, but running, jumping, or playing like the others were things he had to let go of early in life. While the other children chased soccer balls across the field, Arka sat on the edge, gripping the grass, watching in silence. He wasn't the kind of boy who complained, but deep inside, he longed to move freely. He just couldn't. His mother would whisper, "Your strength isn't in your legs, my son. It's in the way you keep going." And by age 9, Arka began seeing the world differently. He mapped faster routes to school, learned to carry lighter bags, and trained his body bit by bit to stay strong. Unknowingly, all of it was preparing him for something far greater than he or anyone could have imagined. But Arka didn't know that yet. All he knew was this: every morning felt like a new mountain to climb. While the other kids rolled out of bed 5 minutes before school, Arka was already on the path an hour earlier. The rocky, slippery trail hurt his legs, but he kept going. Sometimes the pain stopped him mid-step, sometimes he stumbled, but he always found a way to rise. At school, Arka wasn't the popular kid. He often sat alone, tucked in the corner with his worn-out notebook. But that book held everything he'd learned on his own. How to fold his clothes lighter, how to breathe slowly when pain rushed in. Most saw Arka as the weak one, but one person saw more. His name was Mr. Tama, a new teacher who arrived mid-semester. On the very first day, he knelt beside Arka, not with pity, but with respect. And he said, "You don't have to be fast, Arka, but you do have to keep walking." That simple sentence lit a fire inside Arka that hadn't burned in years. From that day on, Arka began noticing things he used to ignore. He started writing down Mr. Tama's words, not just in his notebook, but in his heart. Even when he was tired, he showed up early, not out of fear, but because he wanted to start first. He wanted to change. One morning, Mr. Tama announced a big science competition just 2 months away. The class cheered, except for Arka. He lowered his head, convinced contests like that weren't meant for kids like him. But Mr. Tama leaned down and whispered, "If you have an idea, you deserve to be heard." That night, Arka started sketching something in his notebook, a simple tool to turn rainwater into drinking water. He didn't know if it was good, but for the first time, he felt like his idea mattered. In the days that followed, Arka gathered scraps, empty bottles, charcoal, thin cloth. He failed again and again, but this time he didn't quit, because now it wasn't his body being tested, it was his heart, and that was far stronger than he ever knew. And for the first time in his life, Arka was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, he could win. But belief is a fragile thing. The day before the competition, Arka walked home under the rain, holding a bag filled with his final prototype made from weeks of work, trial, and failure. He smiled all the way, thinking of how proud his mother would be. He imagined standing on stage, showing everyone that someone like him had something to offer. He never noticed the group of boys trailing behind him. They had always picked on him, whispered names, thrown stones, laughed at his limp. But today, it went further. They snatched the bag from his hand, opened it, and laughed even harder. "This junk? You think this will make you special?" Arka begged them to stop, but they didn't. They smashed it. Every bottle, every part crushed in the mud. When they left, Arka sat under the tree, his hands muddy, his eyes wide open but empty. He didn't cry, not because it didn't hurt, but because the pain was deeper than tears could reach. That night, he said nothing. He just lay on the floor, staring at the ceiling, hearing the rain tap softly outside. His mom touched his shoulder gently, but he didn't respond. And somewhere in that silence, the fire inside him dimmed. For the next 2 days, Arka didn't go to school. He didn't open his notebook, didn't touch the scattered tools that still lay in the corner of the room. The rain had stopped, but inside Arka, the storm hadn't. Mr. Tama came by the house on the second evening. He didn't come to talk about school or the contest. He simply sat beside Arka on the porch, saying nothing. After a long while, he quietly said, "You know, a candle can go out, but that doesn't mean it's gone forever. It just needs a little spark." Arka didn't answer, but that night, when everyone was asleep, he lit a match just to see the flame dance. It was small, weak, but it was still fire. The next morning, he picked up his notebook. The pages were still damp, the ink smudged, but the sketch was there. And something inside him whispered, "Start again." So he did. With only 3 days left before the competition, Arka rebuilt. He used plastic cups instead of bottles, cloth scraps instead of filters. He worked late into the night, even when his arms trembled. Not because he thought he could win, but because he didn't want the fire to die again. This time, he wasn't building a water filter. He was rebuilding himself. The day of the competition arrived. Arka stood at the edge of the school auditorium, clutching his fragile prototype wrapped in an old towel. Students buzzed around with flashy posters, laptops, polished gadgets. Everything looked brighter, louder, more expensive. Arka's heart pounded. Every step he took felt like walking uphill through a crowd of giants. When his turn came, the room went quiet. He stepped onto the small stage with his patched-up project and cleared his throat. His hands trembled, but his voice did not. He spoke slowly, explaining how clean water could change lives, especially in places like his village, where even rain was wasted. He described the layers inside his tool, the cloth, the charcoal, the bottles. He didn't have animations or graphs, just truth. And when he poured murky water into the top, then held out a cup of clear, drinkable water from the bottom, the room fell silent. Then applause. Not thunderous, not instant, but real. Even the judges leaned in. But more than anything, Arka saw something in the crowd he hadn't seen in years. Eyes that didn't look down on him, but looked up. In that moment, he didn't care if he won, because he had already proven something far bigger. He belonged. But sometimes, belonging isn't enough. The winners were announced the next day. Arka sat in the front row, fingers tightly interlocked, his project beside him still dusty, still dripping a little from yesterday's demo. Third place, not him. Second place, not him. First place, not him. His chest tightened. For a moment, he smiled anyway. But when he looked at the crowd, he saw how quickly the applause moved on. People rushed to congratulate the winners. Students packed up, judges turned away. He stood up quietly, holding his project. It was over. But as he walked out the back of the auditorium, a soft voice called out behind him, "Wait, Arka, right?" He turned. A girl in a school uniform he didn't recognize held up a phone. "Can I post your invention online? My brother works with a non-profit. What you made, it could help a lot of villages. Not just here." Arka blinked. She smiled. "You didn't lose today." Something lit up in his chest. Something warmer than any trophy. He nodded. "Yes, of course." And just like that, the spark returned. Because even when the applause fades, hope echoes longer. Arka didn't sleep that night. The girl's video had gone viral. Thousands of views turned into tens of thousands. Comments flooded in from students, engineers, even aid workers in remote countries. His school called him to the office, expecting trouble. But instead, the headmaster looked at him with a stunned expression. "You've got a message from someone in Kenya." A week later, Arka stood in front of a camera, nervous, sweating, but smiling as he spoke to an NGO leader across the globe. They wanted to test his water filter in rural communities, starting with 3 villages. "It's cheap, it's clever," they said, "and most of all, it's from someone who understands struggle." The boy who once whispered in class now addressed international partners. The child no one believed in had become the voice of a solution. But it wasn't just the outside world that changed. For the first time, kids in school greeted him with pride. His mother, who had cried in silence for years, now laughed openly while helping him cut bottle parts. Even his teacher, once doubtful, asked him to present to younger students. What Arka didn't realize was that hope doesn't need a big stage. Sometimes it only needs one brave voice and one honest invention made from scraps. One voice, one invention, one spark. That's all it took. Within a month, the NGO shipped prototypes of Arka's filter to 3 countries. Reports came in cleaner water, fewer illnesses, children drinking from plastic bottles with smiles on their faces. But back home, something even more surprising happened. A local news station visited Arka's school, then a national one, then an international crew. Reporters filled his small kitchen where he assembled pieces with his mother. They asked the same question. "How did you do this?" He always gave the same answer. "I didn't try to change the world. I just wanted my friends to stop getting sick." Soon, invitations poured in. Seminars, panels, competitions abroad. But Arka didn't leave right away. Instead, he did something no one expected. He brought his broken water filter to the village where he was born. Under a tree, he gathered a dozen children, dirty, curious, wild with laughter. And he taught them. He showed them how to cut plastic, how to fit each tube, how to clean the sand and charcoal. The kids followed every step, eyes wide. One boy raised his hand. "Can I make one too?" Arka smiled. "You can make it better," because the boy, who once felt like a burden, was now planting hope, child by child, bottle by bottle. "You can make it better." That sentence echoed in Arka's mind as he watched the village kids build their own filters, laughing, cheering when water came out clear. Some brought the filters to their parents. One girl gave hers to her grandmother and cried when she took the first sip. It was no longer just about invention. It was about dignity. Back at school, Arka received a letter, a full scholarship to study engineering at a renowned international academy. His teacher cried when reading it aloud. His mother held the envelope to her chest for a long, silent minute. Arka looked around the classroom he once feared. Now it was filled with eyes that saw him differently, not with pity, but with pride. At the scholarship ceremony, Arka stood on stage. The lights were bright, the world was watching, but his voice was steady. "I used to think I was broken," he said, "but I realized sometimes broken things can hold the cleanest water." The audience rose to their feet. Applause thundered. Later that night, alone in his small room, Arka placed his first water filter beside his bed. It was ugly, cracked, held together by tape. But it had saved lives, and in saving others, Arka had saved a piece of himself. Arka's story didn't end on a stage. It lived on in every child who believed they were too small to matter, in every broken part that was repurposed into something meaningful. The village he returned to started collecting waste plastics, not to throw them away, but to build. One girl turned an old bucket into a hand-washing station. A boy turned soda bottles into a rooftop garden. They didn't call themselves inventors, but they had started to imagine, and the world took notice. Videos of Arka's filter being built in refugee camps, in flooded towns, in classrooms with no windows spread across the internet. People began sharing their own low-cost solutions, inspired by a boy who once thought his silence meant he had no voice. Governments reached out to the NGO. Schools started including Arka's method in science lessons. But Arka didn't chase the spotlight. He wrote letters to children. "Start with what you have," he said. "If all you have is broken, then start from there." Because the real gift wasn't the filter. It was the mindset that even in places where hope is scarce, one honest idea can still ripple across the world. Years passed. Arka's name was no longer just in schoolbooks or TV interviews. It was whispered in tents, lit by lanterns, in villages that had no clean rivers, in classrooms where chalk dust filled the air. But Arka never saw himself as a hero. He still walked with a slight limp, his spine curved in that same old way. But the world no longer looked at him with sympathy. They looked with gratitude. He wasn't just the boy who made water clean. He was the boy who made dreams feel possible. In the last letter he wrote before leaving for university, he penned a message not just to the kids, but to anyone who ever doubted their place in the world. We don't need perfect hands to build something beautiful. We just need the courage to begin. His story reminds us sometimes, the ones who speak the least leave the deepest echo. If this story moved you, imagine how many more voices like Arka's are out there, unheard, unseen, but powerful. Subscribe to our channel, A Sliver of Shadow, for more stories that inspire, that challenge, that shine light into the quiet corners of the world. Because hope doesn't shout, it whispers through the shadows.